This is the Geely Galaxy E5, a compact electric SUV with a range of up to 530 kilometers and a starting price of $17,000 here in the Chinese car market. We brought you a video of this car earlier this year in which we showed you the interior and exterior styling, but today we get to get our dirty little fingers all over the tech and get behind the wheel to find out how it drives.
Welcome to Wheelsboy, where we cover the newest, coolest, and wildest vehicles from the Chinese car market. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I strongly recommend that you check out our first video about the E5 if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the styling inside and out. Suffice it to say, its conservative look fits its role as a global model for the Geely brand, who say that it was engineered to suit the regulations of 89 countries. They aren't specific about which countries exactly, but we saw a right-hand drive example at the car's static debut, so markets like Thailand and Australia are safe bets. We also know that a version will eventually be sold in Malaysia under Proton's EMAS brand.
The E5 is entering the very competitive compact SUV segment here in the Chinese market, one that is dominated by the likes of the BYD Yuan Plus, the BYD Song Pro, and the BYD Yuan Plus. Are you sensing a theme here? BYD isn't the only brand that sells well in this segment, but the three cars I just mentioned happen to occupy 3 of the top 4 spots in the sales charts. The E5 sits in the middle of the BYD trio in terms of size, at 4.615 meters in length, and price at $17,000 to $22,000. I think that size and the fact that it only comes as a pure EV puts it directly in the path of the BYD Yuan Plus, which is convenient because, as many of you will know, we've been using a Yuan Plus as our company vehicle and camera car for over a year now. So how does the E5 stack up against the BYD Yuan Plus? From a stylistic perspective, this is definitely the more conservative of the two cars, both exterior-wise and interior-wise, particularly here on the interior. In fact, I'm an apologist for the interior of the BYD Yuan Plus, but even I recognize the fact that it's a little too quirky for, honestly, probably most people. This interior, on the other hand, feels a lot more simple, a lot more mature, maybe even a bit more premium. That includes the way that things feel. The materials are, well, much more simplified than the BYD Yuan Plus. There's not as complex of a mix of different colors and everything, so it all comes together a little bit more smoothly. Things feel soft to the touch, whether it's on the center console here or the door. The only area that I have any real complaint about is this plastic faux wood here. It looks okay, but it feels pretty cheap, and to be honest with you, it reminds me of some of the stuff I've seen on the interiors of Nettas. And if you watch our reviews of Nettas, you'll know that's not a compliment. The feature mix on the E5 also looks pretty good compared to the older BYD. Take, for example, the center screen. While the BYD comes standard with a 12.8-inch center screen and reserves its 15.6-inch screen only for the top spec version, this car, every single level, comes with a 15.4-inch center screen as standard. That center screen uses the Fly Me Auto operating system from Meizu, and it uses the Dragon Eagle 1 chip. Both of those things happen to come from brands that are at least partially owned by Geely. We were able to see this screen in our static review of the E5 earlier this year, but we weren't able to actually interact with it, so this is the first time I've been able to touch and use it, really. This isn't actually the first time I've used a Fly Me Auto operating system. That was in the Lynk & Co 08, and I would say that the logic of the two systems is very similar if the actual UI isn't exactly the same. So there's nothing particularly innovative when it comes to the menu setup. It's all pretty straightforward, but this thing does have some cool features that you don't see on very many other cars. One of those features is the way that this car can interact with a phone, specifically a phone from Meizu. For those of you who don't know, Meizu is a cell phone maker originally before they were purchased, at least partially, by Geely, and then began creating their operating systems for some of their cars. That means you can interact with a Meizu phone like this in unique ways. For example, if you click on the Meizu icon there, you can see your phone screen perfectly mirrored onto this center screen. So that includes every app that's on your phone, so you can click on them and then make them full screen and stuff like that. So that's a video streaming app. You can also see the other apps that are available on the phone, the kind of native apps. So for example, your calendar, your clock, or your gallery here. So you can look to your phone. Oh, hold on. That's not me. Let's get back out of that. Suffice it to say that this is pretty cool to be able to see all of the apps on your phone perfectly mirrored onto the center screen of the car. That is, arguably at least, a pretty useful feature. A less useful feature, but to me more interesting, is the fact that this car has an exterior speaker so you can play sounds like music outside of the car. That's not the first time we've seen that. This is, however, the first time I've seen something like this. This also has a variety of messages and sounds that you can play, so not just music, but something like, for example,
请您先行，注意安全.
That's saying to a pedestrian nearby, go ahead and walk in front of the car or around the car, pay attention to safety. Another one might be,
谢谢礼让，一路顺风.
thank you for letting me through, have a safe trip. That's useful, right? But how about this one? That's a tiger. That's a lion. That's a cat. And if you were looking to, I guess, sexually harass somebody on the street, don't use that one, guys. But you could, if you wanted to, show off your supercar or your tractor. The E5 also has a 10.2-inch instrument cluster and an available heads-up display. The BYD Yuan Plus, on the other hand, has a, frankly, tiny 5-inch instrument cluster and no available HUD. It is worth noting, however, that BYD has, since they introduced the BYD Yuan Plus, introduced more affordable, newer models like the BYD Yuan Up, which have a larger instrument cluster and an available HUD, so it seems likely that they will add those to the BYD Yuan Plus when they debut the second-generation car sometime maybe late this year or next year. The E5 is available with up to 16 speakers, 4 of which are going to be mounted in the headrest here in the front row, 2 on the passenger side, 2 over here on the driver's side. Now, these are normally just used for things like navigation prompts for the driver, but you can, in the settings, change it so that your music only plays through those speakers or these speakers or both of them. Say, for example, you had a sleeping kid in the back seat, you wanted to listen to your podcast and you didn't want to disturb them, you could set it so that the sound only comes out of the headrest speakers. The E5 is a little over 10 centimeters longer than the BYD Yuan Plus, but its wheelbase is only slightly longer, maybe 3 centimeters or so. Still, rear leg room does feel noticeably bigger than that of the BYD. The seat right now is adjusted for somebody of my height, 5 foot 9 inches or 1.75 meters tall. Speaking of which, headroom, a little bit bigger than that of the BYD. Features back here, not much to speak of, just a fold down center armrest with a cup holder and 2 USB charging ports. That is a Type A and a Type C. I actually appreciate having both of them because I'm somebody who's still transitioning from that Type A to Type C. There is, of course, though, one little secret feature that I cannot forget to mention. I showed it to you on the pre-production car that we videoed earlier this year, but I want to bring it up again, and that is the storage area underneath the rear seats. It's actually got a appreciably large amount of space back here, though it does say max 3.5 kilograms. One thing I really wish we could have on our BYD Yuan Plus is heated and cooled seats, but those weren't even available as an option when we bought the car, and today they're only available on the top spec. This car, however, has them available on multiple trims, not just the top level. And if you get the top level, you can also get available massaging seats and, as you will see, an adjustable leg rest for the passenger's side. Overall seat comfort is quite good in these cars. However, I have to say, even though these seats are a little bit softer and a little more supportive on the side, the low back support isn't as good as it is in the Yuan Plus, and both of these cars do not have adjustable lumbar support, something that I find to be a major oversight, especially on a car that has available massaging seats. The Geely Galaxy E5 is available with two LFP chemistry battery packs, either a 49.5 kilowatt hour unit with a claimed CLTC range of 440 kilometers or a 60 kilowatt hour unit with a claimed range of 530 kilometers, both on the CLTC cycle, of course. Interestingly, the BYD Yuan Plus also has pretty much the exact same battery capacity, but it has claimed ranges of 430 and 510 kilometers. Geely credit this, at least in part, to their new Blade style battery pack. So Blade battery packs are those used by BYD, and their thing is that the cells are long and rectangular and they stretch the entire width of the battery pack. These Dagger cells, as the name would suggest, are shorter, 580 millimeters in length, so they don't stretch the entire width, they're just kind of segmented like this. According to Geely, this new battery pack design has a variety of advantages, including lower energy resistance or electrical resistance, as well as better heat dissipation and greater energy density. Specifically, it has an energy density of 192 watt-hours per kilogram versus the 150 watt-hours of the current BYD Blade battery packs. They also claim that it can survive being pierced by 8 nails simultaneously without catching fire or exploding or anything like that. BYD only claims 1 nail. BYD will be releasing a new generation of their Blade battery soon, potentially even this year, and it promises to also have energy density over 190 watt-hours per kilogram, but for now, Geely has the lead. But what is it like to actually drive this car, particularly in comparison to the BYD Yuan Plus and other competitors in this segment? The E5 comes with a single front-mounted electric motor making 160 kilowatts and 320 newton meters of torque. The claimed 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time, or 62 miles per hour, is 6.75 seconds. Now, would it surprise you to learn that all of those numbers are just slightly better than that of the BYD Yuan Plus, which has 150 kilowatts and 310 newton meters of torque and a claimed official 100 kilometer per hour time of 7.3 seconds. This is why I keep saying this car is aimed squarely at the Yuan Plus. So it's a little bit faster than the BYD Yuan Plus, and I would also add to that the fact that the suspension tuning does feel a little bit better than the Yuan Plus, a little bit more high-end. This suspension is McPherson strut front, double wishbone in the rear versus the McPherson strut front and multi-link rear of the Yuan Plus, and for whether that's technological or hardware reasons or just the tuning of it, it does feel more premium. It feels more solid, the way that it filters out bumps in the road, and also the way that it handles, the way that it enters a corner, does feel that much better than a BYD Yuan Plus. That's not to say that every aspect of this driving experience is better than that of the BYD Yuan Plus. Take, for example, the steering feel, particularly the steering feel just off center, maybe 4 or 5 degrees either way. Just when you start to turn the wheel, which is a very important part of the whole turning the wheel process, obviously, it feels very video gamey, very simulator-esque. Once you get past that initial turn, it does feel better, it smooths out a little bit, but yeah, it just doesn't feel good to enter a corner because of that. This car is available with a Level 2 driver assistance package. We chose not to get the Level 2 driver assistance on our BYD Yuan Plus for a variety of reasons. One of them, and probably the biggest reason, being the fact that we didn't really feel like it was very good, that particular generation of BYD driver assistance. This car's driver assistance, however, is quite useful. So Level 2, maybe Level 2 Plus, but not really actually, because all it is a adaptive cruise control plus a lane keep and lane centering function, and it is just that. It's function. It's a functional thing. I can easily see myself using this thing on a long road trip, particularly on open highways. I have tried to use it a little bit on slightly more congested, slightly smaller roads, and it's not good enough for that, particularly if you need to pass through any kind of stoplight. But here on the highway, A-okay. If there is one area in which the BYD Yuan Plus and this, the Galaxy E5, are essentially neck and neck, it would be NVH, or noise vibration harshness. So harshness, particularly through the suspension, this car is a little bit better than the Yuan Plus, but when it comes to noise, tire noise, wind noise, any kind of motor whine, they're essentially at the same level. I'm currently traveling about 100 kilometers per hour on the highway. I can definitely hear some wind noise. I can hear a little bit of tire roar. Nothing that's particularly disturbing, but I would say pretty much the exact same levels that I get from the Yuan Plus. The heads-up display is one of those small but I think important things that does separate this car from the Yuan Plus in terms of its features. And I will say that this one, while not especially gigantic, does have a very healthy amount of information, i.e. your GPS navigation prompts, as well as some visualization for your driver assistance system and your other basic driving information. It's not huge, it's not overly impressive, especially now compared to bigger ones like the one in a Li Auto or an Ito M9 or something like that, but it does make this car feel that much more of a premium experience. When the BYD Yuan Plus hit the car market almost 3 years ago, it was a super competitive vehicle, and it is to this day. However, having driven the E5, I have to say that I think the industry has caught up. This car is an overall comprehensive upgrade compared to the BYD Yuan Plus, and if I were to buy a car in this segment today, I'd have a hard time not getting the E5.